Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are undertaking a really in-depth exploration of what many recovery sources call the most destructive force there is.
That's right. We're talking about resentment.
Exactly. And if you're grappling with that kind of overwhelming internal conflict, or maybe you've stopped a certain behavior, but, well, peace hasn't exactly followed, this deep dive is definitely for you.
Yeah. We've pulled together quite a stack of sources here, foundational texts, newer commentary.
All trying to understand why resentment gets labeled the, quote, #1 offender.
And that phrase, #1 offender, it's loaded with significance, isn't it? Our mission today really is to go beyond just saying anger is bad.
Right.
We want to analyze the precise psychological and spiritual mechanism that makes these negative emotions so, well, fatal to internal balance and, crucially, to sustained recovery.
So it's about the how and why it's so damaging.
Precisely. And the sources, thankfully, provide a pretty structured, practical roadmap. It's found mostly in the steps,
Yeah.
tools to actually dismantle these emotions. So we're aiming to dissect that inventory process. That's the core tool, really designed to expose and remove the hidden roots of suffering.
And showing how recovery isn't just starving something, it demands a fundamental shift in your whole emotional response system.
That's the core of it, a
Yeah.
total overhaul.
Okay, so let's unpack that initial conflict first. Before recovery, this internal war, this battle with anxiety, shame, sadness, rage, often it was almost invisible, wasn't it? Because it
Right.
got instantly, automatically numbed.
Anesthetized is a good word, yeah. We're looking at what one writer, Caroline Knapp, famously called the core emotional beasts.
Emotional beasts, I like that.
Yeah. These are the feelings that the individual, maybe having never developed healthy coping skills, just immediately ran from.
Sending them searching for, well, chemical fix or maybe a behavioral one.
Right. It creates that almost mechanical stimulus response loop. Russell Brand described it really starkly, didn't he?
Yeah, the I'm lonely, have sex, I'm sad, get drunk, I'm bored, eat a cake.
Exactly. It's entirely automatic, almost unconscious, but incredibly powerful.
And the substance or the behavior, it gave temporary good feelings. Or maybe just shelter.
Shelter is key.
Uh,
Shelter from internal storms, external storms.
Yeah.
Whatever felt overwhelming, it was a management system,
Yeah.
a really destructive one, but it functioned in a way.
And the tragic irony, which the courage to change points out, is that the person starts seeing the substance or the behavior as an ally.
Yeah, a friend, a shelter from life's harshness, even while it's actively destroying everything.
Because they're seeking comfort, maybe control.
Comfort and control, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the result of relying on that crutch, that specific way of managing feelings, it's not just the physical blackout people talk about.
Right, there's the emotional blackout too.
Exactly. Even when you're newly abstaining, maybe in early sobriety, you can still feel this profound emotional dullness.
Like the color is drained out of everything.
Yeah, the sources paint that picture really vividly. Trudging through the day, shoulders slumped, everything flipped to grayscale. It's that awful, heavy, exhausted dread.
Tangled thoughts, confusion.
Emotional flatness becomes the new normal. And it's a painful normal.
That dry hangover, people call it sometimes. The internal chaos that just stopping the substance doesn't fix.
It highlights the urgency, doesn't it?
Mm.
For deeper work. Sobriety, just stopping, it's only the barest beginning.
It's not the finish line.
Not even close.
Yeah.
If we really want to receive the full gifts of a new life, as the texts say, the awakening has to continue.
Meaning you have to discard the old life?
Yeah, discard the old life for a new one that actually works under any conditions, whatever.
Okay, under any conditions, whatever. That's a big claim. What does that mean in practice?
It means it works whether things are going great externally or terribly, whether you're succeeding by worldly standards or failing, whether you're in physical pain or feeling joyful, the internal state remains steady.
And that requires dealing with those emotional beasts head on.
You have to. Because if that emotional operating system stays broken, stays wired the old way, well, the return to old patterns is almost inevitable.
It pulls you back.
It does. The source material forces us to see that the real battle ultimately isn't with the drink or the drug or the behavior. It's psychological. It's internal.
Okay, so if the symptoms are things like rage, anxiety, and this big one, resentment, we need to understand the root cause. What's the actual foundational flaw that breeds all this internal poison?
This is where the sources really zero in.
Hmm.
And it's often, it's a tough pill to swallow for many people starting this path.
What is it?
The central finding, and you see this echoed across decades of recovery literature, is that the root flaw in the human experience, especially for those prone to these issues, lies in demand.
Demand. Not just desire, but demand.
Yes, the individual operates from an ego-centered personality, and this is characterized by an utterly overwhelming sense of self-will
Wanting what I want when I want it.
and how you want it. Exactly. This ego-centeredness produces a very distinct character profile, according to the texts. Things like oversensitivity.
Okay, taking things personally.
Very personally, a remarkably low tolerance for frustration. Things don't go your way, and boom.
Explosion. Or maybe implosion.
Right. And that deadly cocktail. Anger, resentment, and fear. All bubbling away. It is quite simply, as the big book famously puts it, self-will run riot.
Self will run riot. And the spiritual or psychological recognition needed here is this idea of being not God.
That's central. When we insist on clinging to that ego-centered view, we're essentially trying to exert infinite control.
Over everything. Circumstances, ourselves, other people.
Everyone around us,
Yeah.
We're demanding that reality itself conform to our internal expectations, our personal blueprint for how things should be.
And that demand, well, it's doomed to fail, isn't it?
It's guaranteed to fail.
Yeah.
Because reality is inherently uncontrollable, certainly by us. If I demand perfect weather for my picnic and it rains,
Yeah.
my ego doesn't just see rain.
It sees a personal slight, an injustice.
Exactly. And that feeling, that sense of being wronged by reality, that's where resentment takes root. The sources really emphasize that this demand is the fuel.
And the ego doesn't just sit there quietly when its demands aren't met.
Oh no. It manifests. It acts out. It shows up in very specific, often toxic, behaviors that systematically sabotage relationships and any hope of internal peace.
This is where the sources get incredibly precise, right? Detailing the specific, sometimes sneaky forms that this self-love or maybe self-centeredness takes.
They do, and it's really helpful because it moves beyond vague ideas of selfishness. These are like architectural flaws in the personality that need identifying. One source, for sinners only, really lays these out.
Okay, let's walk through them because I suspect many listeners will recognize these, maybe in themselves, maybe in others.
I think so. First, there's the love of praise, popularity, and social success.
Okay. Needing applause, needing to be liked.
Constantly. When this is paramount, every interaction becomes a kind of performance. You're not really connecting authentically. You're managing your image, seeking that external validation.
And when it doesn't come, or not enough of it.
The ego feels wounded, slighted, and resentment builds against the person or the group who failed to provide the required praise.
So your internal sense of worth is totally outsourced. If the boss doesn't rave about your report, you don't just feel disappointed.
You feel wrong.
Yeah.
Which leads straight into the next one. Standing on one's dignity.
Standing on dignity sounds noble, but the sources say it often means you end up with little of it left.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because this dignity isn't true self-respect. It's more like a fragile protective shell, a thin-skinned defense against any perceived slight.
So the moment someone disagrees or critiques or just fails to show what the ego considers proper respect.
The person stands on their dignity and usually launches a counterattack or withdraws into wounded silence. It's the ego demanding reverence. It's a massive source of conflict.
Okay, what's next on the list?
Perhaps the most insidious one, and one we see fueling resentment constantly, is the development of sensitiveness,
Sensitiveness.
which the sources bluntly redefine as plain old touchiness.
Touchiness. Okay, that's clearer. Like a hair trigger?
Exactly, a hair trigger, an offhand remark, maybe a certain tone of voice, a perceived exclusion at a party. Any minor social friction instantly causes a flare-up.
It's overreactivity. The world fails to meet the ego's demand for constant approval or, kid glove treatment.
Perfectly pet.
Hmm.
And this touchiness often morphs into the next one. Self-pity.
Ah, the poor me syndrome.
Yeah, where one, as the text says, hugs failure or cultivates a martyr complex.
The martyr complex, look how much I suffer.
Right. The person silently, or not so silently, says, I can stand anything. But they deliberately change nothing about their circumstances or their reactions. They're using their suffering.
Losing it as currency. To gain sympathy or attention or maybe make others feel guilty.
Precisely. It accumulates this kind of moral superiority or maybe a sense of relational debt they feel others owe them. Look at all I endure for you. You owe me.
And when others inevitably fail to pay that perceived debt.
Resentment explodes or simmers, poisoning everything.
Okay, one more.
The last one listed here is self-importance, which inevitably gives rise to jealousy.
Self-importance leading to jealousy? How does that work?
If I define myself primarily by my position, my reputation, my accomplishments, or how I stack up against others, I must constantly compare.
Keeping score.
Always keeping score. So if someone else achieves more, gets more attention, seems happier, my self-importance feels threatened. deflated.
And the toxic reaction is jealousy, which feels awful.
It feels awful, and it fuels resentment towards the person who outshone you. So these five love of praise, standing on dignity, touchiness, self-pity, and self-importance, jealousy, they are the building blocks.
The building blocks of resentment because they guarantee constant disappointment when the world inevitably refuses to cater to the ego's absolute demands.
Exactly. It's a setup for suffering.
Which leads us, I think, directly to this really profound spiritual paradox of resentment. You called it the cosmic chain earlier.
Yes. The sources, including some commentary on the Sermon on the Mount, frame resentment not just as dislike, not even intense dislike.
What is it then?
It's a deep form of attachment.
Attachment. That seems counterintuitive. You're attached to someone you can't stand.
That's the paradox. But think about it. It's presented as a kind of cosmic truth. It takes two to make a prisoner.
The prisoner and the jailer.
Right. When you hold resentment against someone, the texts say you are bound to that person by a real, though mental, link. A chain, described as stronger than steel.
So even though you intensely dislike them,
They occupy the most valuable real estate you have, your mind. They live there, rent-free, often controlling your thoughts, your moods, your emotional reactions.
so the person you hate most is the one you're most tightly bound to. You're their jailer, maybe, in your mind.
But to keep them locked up in your mental prison, you have to stay there too. You're chained to the prisoner. It's a constant spiritual and psychological drain. You're depleting your own energy just to maintain the grudge.
Wow. Okay, so the profound consequences.
Freedom. Your own freedom depends entirely on your ability and willingness to break that chain. To set yourself free, the sources say you must cut the tie. And it requires a clear and spiritual act of forgiveness.
Forgiveness, not for them necessarily, but for yourself.
Primarily for yourself. By forgiving them, releasing them from the debt you feel they owe, releasing them from your mental prison, you are actually saving your own soul. You're liberating your own energy, your own attention.
Allowing that psychic space they occupied to be filled with something. Well, better, healthier.
Exactly. Resentment, from this perspective, is a form of self-imprisonment that serves absolutely no one in the long run, least of all you.
In all of this, these manifestations of self-love, this cosmic chain, it circles back to what you mentioned earlier, emotional immaturity.
Yes, the self-will run riot is, in many ways, a refusal to grow up emotionally.
The sources point out those adolescent urges, right? For complete approval, utter security, perfect romance.
Yeah, they say those might be understandable, maybe even appropriate at age 17, but they become an impossible way of life at 47 or 57, or even 27, frankly.
Because life just doesn't deliver those things perfectly.
Ever. Spiritual growth, emotional maturity, it requires drastic revisions to these instinctual demands. Maturity is accepting that perfect approval from everyone is impossible. Utter security is an illusion in this world. Perfect, flawless romance is a fantasy.
So the journey is away from demanding perfection from the world,
A demand that guarantees constant resentment.
towards accepting the facts of life.
Accepting reality. Our circumstances, ourselves, others as they are, flaws and all. That's the core work. This realistic humility, this acceptance, it's the foundation of any genuine progress, any lasting peace.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so if self-centered demand is the disease and resentment is this toxic #1 symptom, the next logical question is how do we get rid of it? Like surgically remove it.
Right, and this moves us squarely into the path to freedom, which relies heavily on courageous honesty, embodied really in the action steps, specifically the inventory and the confession, steps 4 and 5.
Step 4, the moral inventory. What's the goal here? It sounds kind of daunting.
It can sound daunting, yeah. But the way it's described isn't about self-flagellation or just, endlessly blaming others. It's framed as a cool examination.
Cool examination, like objective.
Yeah, objective analysis.
Yeah.
A cool examination of the damages that occurred to us during life and a sincere effort to look at them in a true perspective. It's analysis, not wallowing in self-pity.
Okay, can we break down the mechanics of it? Because it's more than just making a list of everyone who ever annoyed you.
Oh, much more. That's just the start. It's structured very specifically to pivot the focus back onto oneself.
How does it do that?
Okay, so the instruction is typically list the person, institution, or principle you resent. Column 1.
Right, who or what am I mad at?
Column 2. Why? What did they do? What's the specific cause of the resentment? Get it down on paper. The injury.
Okay, that part feels maybe easy, even satisfying in a dark way.
It can, But that's where most people stop in everyday life.
Right.
Rehashing the injury. The inventory forces you to go further. Column 3 asks, what parts of the self were affected?
What parts of me were affected? Like my self-esteem, my security, my ambitions.
Exactly. My personal relations, my sex relations, my pride. You identify where the hook landed in you.
Okay, still focused on the injury, but getting more specific about my reaction.
Yes. But then comes the absolute crucial transformative part. The pivot.
Yeah.
Column 4.
What's column 4?
Column 4 is where you turn the spotlight entirely on yourself. You analyze your own mistakes in relation to that person or situation. Where was I selfish?
Ah, okay.
Where was I dishonest? Where was I self-seeking, meaning trying to control or manipulate? Where was I frightened?
So it forces you to look past their actions and examine your own contribution, your own defects that were triggered or involved.
Precisely. You identify the specific character defects like that touchiness we talked about, or self-pity, or dishonesty, or fear that were driving your reaction and your behavior in that whole situation.
The moment you shift focus from their offense to your contribution, wow. I can see how the resentment might start to lose its grip.
It has to. You can't easily maintain that righteous, indignant anger when you're honestly looking at your own part in the mess. You can't keep justifying your own behavior by endlessly pointing fingers.
It punctures the self-righteousness.
Completely. And the sheer act of writing this down, listing these resentments, the causes, the effects on you, and then your defects, seeing it starkly on paper without the usual webbing of language or rationalization, we wrap around things.
It cuts through the story you tell yourself.
Yeah. And one source describes this process as having a physical effect. It says the inventory has the effect of taking the ground glass out of us.
Ground glass, that's such a powerful image.
Isn't it? That emotional substance that still cuts and inhibits.
Like tiny invisible shards inside you. You don't always feel them when you're still, but every time you move, interact, think about the past, they just cut you internally, that constant low-level pain.
That's a perfect way to put it. The inventory gets that raw material. The resentment, the fear, the dishonesty, the self-pity, out on paper, stripped bare of justification.
But just listing it, seeing the ground glass, isn't enough to actually remove it, is it?
No. That's crucial. Seeing it is step 4. The key to actual removal, to getting it out, lies in the next critical action, confession. Step 5.
Step 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs.
That's the one. Confession. Sharing what you found in step 4.
It's described as an ancient spiritual discipline. Sounds difficult. Necessary, the texts say, but difficult. Why? Why is this step so essential, especially for people who might already feel vulnerable or ashamed?
The necessity really stems from the need for absolute, unambiguous, external honesty. You've maybe admitted it to yourself on paper in step 4, but step 5 takes it out of your head.
Into the light of day.
Exactly. Sources like Russell Brand's commentary emphasize you must expose your truest, previously concealed self, the stuff you found in column 4, in a way that leaves no room for deception of yourself or anyone else.
It breaks the secrecy, the isolation.
Completely. We spend years, maybe decades, concealing, minimizing, rationalizing our defects. The only way to truly excise them, to reduce their power, is to bring them out into the open and admit, this is part of me and I need help with it. It's an act of profound humility, yes, but also profound realism.
Okay, but it still sounds terrifying. If I'm already feeling isolated and maybe ashamed of what I found in my inventory, why risk telling someone else? What are the actual rewards for doing this scary thing?
The rewards are immense and often quite immediate. First, and maybe most powerfully, you lose that paralyzing sense of isolation, that feeling of, I must be the only person this awful.
Which keeps you stuck.
Keeps you stuck in shame. The Oxford group literature, which heavily influenced the steps, notes this surprising and incredibly healthy discovery that happens in confession. All the sins, all the defects you thought were so uniquely terrible and original.
Turns out they're pretty common.
Turns out they are also the sins of others. Everyone's got their stuff. That realization, that shared humanity and imperfection, immediately lifts that crushing feeling of being utterly alone and uniquely flawed.
So the shared human experience becomes the antidote to toxic shame. That makes sense.
Exactly. Plus, you gain real honesty and realism about yourself. You stop believing your own BS, the excuses you've told yourself for years.
You see yourself more clearly.
Much more clearly. You gain humility, naturally. And you begin to find true kinship with others, bridging that gap that self-centered fear and secrecy created. It's really the essential step toward inner tranquility and feeling connected.
Connected to others, maybe to a higher power?
To God as you understand God, or just to the reality of the world around you in a healthier way. It breaks the isolation bubble.
Okay. This brings up a really practical and critical question, though. Who should be that another human being? The sources are pretty specific about choosing wisely, right? They warn against just splurging secrets.
Very specific warnings, yes. You don't just grab anyone off the street, or even necessarily your best friend or spouse.
Why not?
The suggestion is generally to choose someone who understands the process. Someone who's maybe done this themselves, perhaps someone in a 12-step program, or a clergy member, therapist, or someone else who is seriously tuned in, as one source puts it.
Tuned in through some kind of constructive ideology or practice?
Right. The principle is they need to understand the spirit of what you're doing. They need to be capable of listening without judgment. That's crucial.
No condemnation.
Absolutely not.
Right.
But also without minimizing or rationalizing what you're sharing. They shouldn't be telling you, oh, it wasn't that bad.
They need to let you own it.
Let you own it fully.
Hmm.
I want to zero in on that specific warning you mentioned. Don't confess to someone who loves you too much. Why would deep love be a barrier here?
Yeah, that seems paradoxical again.
It does, but think about the goal. The goal is unsparing, non-judgmental truth, aimed at your self-awareness and release.
Mm-hmm.
It's not primarily about seeking comfort or validation in that moment.
Yeah.
Someone who loves you very deeply, say a devoted spouse, a loving parent, might instinctively react by trying to protect you from the pain of facing your defects.
They might soften the edges, offer excuses.
Exactly. They might jump in with, oh, honey, that wasn't selfish, you were just tired, or,
Ugh.
well, they deserved it after what they did. They might inadvertently participate in your old rationalizations because their love makes them want to shield you.
And that would undermine the whole point of the exercise.
Completely. It prevents the necessary self-recognition. The person listening needs to be able to maintain a certain objective, spiritual or therapeutic stance, allowing you to fully own the defect, see it clearly, without them immediately offering a soft landing or an excuse.
So choose someone who can hold that space. Non-judgmental, but also not enabling.
That's the ideal, yes. Someone committed to the principle of rigorous honesty.
Okay, so once that deep cleaning is done, the inventory written in step 4, the confession made in step 5, the ground glass is presumably out, or at least identified. The next challenge is maintenance, right? How do we stop it from building up again? How do we prevent that ground glass from reforming in our spirit day after day?
Yes, exactly. Because life keeps happening. People keep being people. We keep being people. This sets the stage for sustaining that newfound emotional balance through ongoing practice.
And this is where step 7 comes in strong. Humility.
Step 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings, becomes absolutely paramount here. The sources are emphatic. The attainment of greater humility is the foundation principle of each and every one of the 12 steps.
Not just step 7, all of them.
All of them. There's a paradox here.
Yeah.
The texts say without some degree of humility, you probably can't even get sober in the first place. You have to admit powerlessness.
Right. Step 1 requires humility.
But, they add, without much more humility than just that bare minimum admission, you won't achieve lasting happiness or usefulness in sobriety. The initial humility gets you in the door. Ongoing humility keeps you growing.
We often misunderstand humility, though, don't we? Equate it with being a doormat or self-abasement.
A very common misunderstanding. But that's not what the sources mean by spiritual humility. It's not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking about yourself less.
Okay. So what does true humility look like in daily practice, according to these texts?
It's defined by action, mostly. It means genuinely acknowledging and respecting the views, the accomplishments, even the prerogatives of other people, even when they conflict with your own opinions or self-interest.
So less arguing, more listening.
Definitely more listening. It means having the capacity to accept being wrong and not having a complete emotional meltdown about it.
Stepping back from that ego-driven need to always be right, always win the argument, always have the last word.
Precisely. It's letting go of that constant need for self-justification. And understanding the nature of surrender is really key to unlocking this humility.
Surrender is another loaded word. People think it means giving up, weakness.
Exactly. Our sources, especially those referencing the Oxford group philosophy that influenced the early steps, tackle this head-on. They note that submission to God, or a higher power, is often seen as cowardly.
But they argue the opposite.
They argue it requires a tremendous amount of courage. Courage to die to the world, meaning to let go of that reliance on ego, pride, material status, self-sufficiency, and instead choose to live in connection with spiritual principles or a higher power.
So it's not weakness, it's choosing a different source of strength.
Exactly. It's the ultimate act of strength and realism to finally acknowledge, okay, running the show based entirely on my own ego and self-will, it doesn't work. I need help. I need a different operating system.
Okay. So once that philosophical grounding in humility and surrender is sort of established, how do we make it work day to day, moment to moment?
That brings us to step 10. Continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. This is often called the acid test of recovery,
The acid test. Why?
because this is where the rubber meets the road daily. Step 10 is the commencement of putting this whole new way of living, the principles of the previous 9 steps, into practical moment-by-moment use.
The challenge being, can you actually live this way?
Can you stay sober, keep an emotional balance, and live to good purpose under all conditions? That's the goal, and it requires continual self-inventory, not just a big one once a year.
Like a daily check-in, or even more frequent.
Ideally, moment-by-moment vigilance, watching for those old patterns to creep back in. When we are wrong, when a resentment starts to bubble, when that touchiness flares up, when we act out of fear or selfishness, the instruction is crystal clear. We promptly admit it.
Promptly. That word seems critical, not letting it fester. Absolutely critical. It's a mechanism of immediate course correction. Think about it. If I let a small resentment against my colleagues sit for 3 hours, let alone 3 days, it starts to grow. It gets toxic. It feeds that ground glass inside.
Right, you start building a case in your head.
Exactly. But if I catch it in the moment, okay, my self-importance just got tweaked there, or wow, I reacted out of fear. And I promptly admit it, at least to myself, maybe to my higher power, maybe even to the person if appropriate.
Then you stop it in its tracks.
You stop it. You prevent the internal damage. You take responsibility instantly. It frees you from the burden of carrying around an embarrassing secret or constructing a self-justifying lie.
So the prompt admission prevents those little ego flare-ups, those small disappointments, those fears, from escalating back into full-blown, potentially life-threatening resentment or acting out.
That's the maintenance plan. Keep the slate clean daily.
And this continuous cleanup, this prompt admission of wrongs, it leads naturally into resolving past harms too, right? Through making amends. Steps 8 and 9. Yes. Step 8 is making a list of all persons we had harmed and becoming willing to make amends to them all. Step 9 is actually making direct amends wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others.
And amends aren't just about saying sorry. They're about action, correcting imbalance.
Exactly. Restitution where possible. But they require immense sensitivity. This isn't about just clearing your conscience at someone else's expense.
Which brings us to that powerful warning. Honesty without sensitivity is brutality.
Such an important guideline. The entire intent of making amends is to bring relationships back into balance as much as possible, to make things right, not to use the amend process as another weapon, another opportunity to unload your emotional debris onto someone, or to further damage them or yourself.
And the sources even give examples of what not to do, right? The
Yeah.
bad apology. I think you mentioned the term mea culpa.
Yes, I love that term, mea culpa. It's that insincere, still ego-driven apology. It sounds like this. I'm sorry you feel I was rude to you. Or, I'm sorry if what I said upset you.
Subtly shifting the blame. You're apologizing for their feelings, their reaction, not your action.
Precisely. You're effectively saying, the problem isn't what I did, it's your oversensitivity. It maintains your ego's innocence. It doesn't actually acknowledge harm done.
So a true apology, a real amend, has to formalize what we kind of spiritually intuit anyway. It must be for what you did.
Yes. Own your action. The guidelines are usually pretty simple and direct. Things like, be specific about what you're apologizing for. Don't make excuses or justify your behavior. I was having a bad day, doesn't cut it.
And critically, let them respond.
Yes. Once you've offered the amend, sincerely and simply, you have to let the recipient speak. Let them react. Let them have their say without you interrupting, defending yourself, or explaining your motives further. The focus must remain on acknowledging the harm you caused and making restitution if appropriate.
It's about cleaning up your side of the street, thoroughly and humbly.
That's the goal. And if an individual really commits to this whole process, the inventory, the confession, the ongoing humility and prompt admissions, the sensitive amends, the promised result, is a different state of being.
A state of emotional stability and freedom.
Exactly.
Where does that stability come from now if it's not coming from controlling things or relying on substances?
Well, the sources argue pretty strongly that the best possible source of lasting emotional stability isn't found in people, or circumstances or achievements.
Where then?
It's found in dependence upon a higher power or spiritual principles, dependence upon concepts like perfect justice, as understood spiritually, forgiveness, both giving and receiving, and unconditional love. This, they argue, is a healthy dependence.
Unlike the old dependencies.
Unlike the old toxic dependencies on substances, or even the unhealthy dependence on people to meet all our emotional needs and provide perfect security, what's sometimes called being a people addict.
Yeah.
Relying on spiritual principles or a higher power is seen as something that actually works sustainably where nothing else would.
And that leads ultimately to freedom.
Freedom, yeah. The texts say we become free when we finally cast aside that old, failing philosophy of self-sufficiency, of ego-driven control.
And develop the willingness to accept the new facts of living, accept reality.
Accept reality as it is, accept ourselves as we are, accept others as they are. When we do that, the chaotic cycle resentment leading to acting out, leading to shame, leading back to more resentment, that cycle gets broken.
And life looks different.
It feels different. The life of the person practicing these principles is described as living in a place of relief, or rather freedom from craving. Not just craving substances, but craving approval, craving control, craving perfection.
Ready for life, laughter, enjoyment, purpose.
Yes, because all that internal energy that was constantly being used up, defending the ego, nursing grievances, holding onto that ground glass, chaining oneself to enemies, it's now freed up.
Freed up for constructive living, for
Yeah.
connection, for peace.
It's that continuous awakening, step by step, that removes the blocks, the resentments, the fears, the selfishness that stand between the individual and, well, the divine inflow of power, guidance, and serenity, however you conceive that.
Okay. Let's try and synthesize this journey we've taken through the source material today. It's been quite a deep dive.
It has a lot to unpack.
We started by really defining that internal conflict, those emotional beasts, fueled by an ego-centered demand that things go our way.
And how that demand inevitably leads to the number one offender, resentment.
Resentment, which we learned is so fatal because it's actually a form of self-imprisonment, that cosmic chain binding us to the very people or situations we hate most.
Right, and the solution offered isn't just try harder or get over it. It's a structured path requiring courageous honesty.
Starting with that cool examination of damages in the detailed Step 4 inventory, designed to identify and help remove that ground glass.
Followed by the necessary, often difficult, but ultimately liberating act of confession in Step 5. Sharing our wrongs with another human being to truly break the isolation and the cycle of secrecy.
And then sustaining that freedom requires daily vigilance, the daily application of humility through Step 7.
Recognizing our limitations, our proper place.
And practicing prompt, honest self-correction via Step 10. Catching those resentments and defects immediately before they take root again.
Which ensures our relationships can heal, and any amends we make are sincere and effective, not just another ego trip.
So our deep dive really shows that this path of recovery, it's fundamentally about changing our internal operating system. Painful, maybe, but ultimately liberating.
Shifting from self-will, demand, and isolation to acceptance, connection, and reliance on something greater than our own ego.
Okay. But let's leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought drawn from these powerful sources we've discussed.
Yeah, something to chew on.
The core of the original problem, for many, was recognizing powerlessness over a substance or a behavior in Step 1. And that recognition brought the first incredible gift, sobriety, stopping the destructive pattern.
But the continuous challenge, the ongoing work of maturity, is about recognizing where we still assume infinite control in other areas, where we still try to play God, as the text put it.
Play God to our fellows, trying to run their lives, judge them, fix them.
Or where we seek to rely wholly on guaranteed human protection and care, demanding perfect security or approval from people who simply can't provide it flawlessly.
So if the initial powerlessness was over, say, alcohol, the lifelong surrender is perhaps over the need to control reality itself.
That's the deeper challenge, isn't it?
Yeah.
The challenge remains, can we take realistic surveys of the facts of life, our circumstances, ourselves, other people, and accept them as they are?
So the question for you, the listener, is, where in your life are you still fighting against reality? Where are you still operating from that fundamental demand that guarantees resentment will bloom?
Recognizing that and applying these principles there, well, that's the continuous process of surrender, and perhaps the next step in finding true, deep, and lasting freedom.
It's a powerful challenge indeed. Thank you for diving deep with us today on resentment.
Thanks for the discussion.
We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.